this was a really key time in history because the countries were lined up to come up with a major legally binding agreement on climate. So we felt that we really needed to organize the oceans community to have a big voice and to have a big impact at COP21. So together with the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and 45 other co-organizers, we mobilized a big effort. And they were 6 governments, the main United Nations agencies, academic institutions around the world, and the biggest or the most important ocean non-governmental organizations. So it was very hard to first mobilize all those organizations, and of course they have a little bit of different views, so it's always very difficult to balance all the views and to come up with a package of recommendations that makes sense. So that was a challenge, but it worked well. The second one, of course, is that we wanted to involve really high-level political leaders, presidential level, heads of state or ministers. And in fact, we were able to get about 30 high-level, including the Prince of Monaco, including the President of Palau, the ministers from France, Papua New Guinea, many other ministers or ambassadors, and also the heads of the UN agencies, like the head of UNESCO and so on. And then what we wanted to do too, we organized an international expert working group of about 36 colleagues from around the world, including, of course, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, the Ocean Policy Research Institute. And then we developed policy recommendations on all aspects of oceans and climate. The central role of oceans in climate, then issues in mitigation, issues in adaptation, issues in financing, and issues in capacity development. A lot of challenges, but it did really make a big difference in 2 ways. First of all the noise and all the political statements, we were able to make contributed to the result that we got a very good legally binding agreement at COP21, and that it was ambitious in the sense that it said we should limit the increase in greenhouse gases to less than 2 degrees centigrade, but to strive for even lower, 1.5 degrees centigrade. But then second, we got a major word on oceans in the preamble about the need to protect the integrity of all ecosystems, including oceans. And you might think it's not a big deal, but really it's a big deal. It's a big deal to get any word or any comma in this kind of a big international agreement. The important part is that we've had global agreement that this is the way to go. And that is very hard to do, to get all of the countries in the world to buy into this. Initially, people who were involved in this negotiating process, they tended to have a limited idea about oceans, that it wasn't concerned really with economics and social, because we have 3 pillars of sustainable development: environment, economy, and social. So the people tended to think that oceans was like a whale protection issue or something like that. So it took a lot of work at the beginning of that process to demonstrate that oceans is very important economically and socially. We have half of the world's population lives in coastal zones or small island states. 90% of international trade travels by ship in the world's oceans. Fisheries is a huge business. We have offshore oil and gas, you name it, so the contributions of oceans to the global economy is huge. So this was a big process and a big challenge to convince the decision makers that oceans has to be one of the top priorities of the whole world. It started with the strong political support of the small island developing states, particularly the Pacific small island states, who argued very strongly for what we call a standalone goal on oceans. Well, it's never enough. What really counts is how do countries implement. So now we have to work with countries to help them implement these goals, these sustainable development goals related to oceans. I think that people really understand, generally, these issues already around the world. There's great recognition. The small island states understand that if climate change is not curbed, they are going to suffer very, very much. They may not have their countries anymore in the future. By and large, this situation of public understanding has changed tremendously in the last few years. I think what we've seen this week at the symposia that we have had here in Tokyo is that there is already really extensive scientific information on what are the effects of ocean warming and ocean acidification. What are the projections, and what might be the impacts on the seafood and on the fishermen and on other people. So I think it's really important now to convey that information to the public. But I think that people really are rational, and they need to be informed. And they need, knowledge for them is power. Then if they know what may happen, they can then support measures to avoid the bad things happening. And people do understand now, I think, that we are in the same boat. To help people to think about the long term, all they have to think about is their children and grandchildren, That's what we care about. We care for the future. We have the responsibility to ensure a good future for our children and our grandchildren. So I'm very optimistic. Give people information, they will be rational, they will act. Well, I know mainly the Ocean Policy Research Institute within the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and they're already doing a great job. I mean, we have had the pleasure of cooperating for a long time, and on really big issues like ocean governance globally and in different countries, developing national ocean policies. We have had the pleasure of working on climate and oceans, and also on advancing the global ocean agenda, like the enactment or the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, I think the OPRI is totally on the right track and already making huge contributions to the global ocean agenda. I think what Mr. Terashima said at the beginning of the symposium, that OPRF used to be a think tank, but now he wants, OPRI to be a think and do tank. So both, analysis and action. I think that is totally perfect for what needs to be done today.